When it comes to studying an aspect in an idea, psychologists are usually willing to test it out. However, some of these experiments will cross the line between science and humanity, where people's rights are abused. To prevent this, a group called APA, or American Psychology Association, set ethical standards that require proper treatment to the people experimenters are using to study. Some of these standards are no deception, consent upon arrival, very little to no physical or mental harm. In this tutorial, I will present two past famous experiments that have been seen as unethical. Although both experimenters have tried to keep their experiments okay on ethical standards by changing their layout, both experiments turned out to be stressful on participants who had agreed on entering. Both experiments had the consent of participants, but none of the participants really knew what they were about to face. What exactly is the definition of an ethical issue? Well, ethics are the guidelines that humans make so that people can treat and judge each other normally. Most of us know well not to lie to others. Similarly, in psychology, experiments should not deceive the participants. However, there are some exceptions to this rule because some deception is required for the experiment. For example, there is an experiment about human reactions to dangerous wildlife. A trained lion is used to prevent any harm to the participants if a real wild lion went loose. However, if the participants were told that the lion is a harmless lion which has been tamed, the many participants might become friendly to the lion instead of her usual reaction, which is to scream and run away. To cover this exception, experimenters must later inform the participants of the truth. One experiment that comes into many minds of people when ethical issues in experiments are addressed is the Stanford experiment in 1973. This experiment, led by Philip Zimbardo and his team, were studying about psychological effects of being a prisoner or prison guard. The participants he chose were 24 out of 75 people who were normal, healthy males that do not have a medical or psychological problem. The experiment took place in a basement in a psychology building in Stanford. 12 participants were assigned roles as prison guards. These guards were given sunglasses to prevent eye contact and an attempt to avoid direct conflict. The other 12 participants were assigned roles as prisoners. These prisoners were assigned numbers and had chains around their ankles. This experiment contained many ethical issues and would not have been allowed if APA guidelines were in effect. Even though Zimbardo tried to keep the experiment safe by allowing prisoners to be released whenever they wanted to, he did not consider about internal pressure, or in other words, peer pressure. Participants that became roles as prisoners were mentally harmed, but fortunately these damages were not long-term. Some of the mental damages prisoners faced were surprise arrests, strip search without consent upon arrival and as punishment, and many more. People's rights were being abused, even from the beginning. Although Zimbardo did debrief what the experiment was about, he didn't explain to an extent of specifics of how they were going to be treated. Not only were the prisoners mentally damaged, but also physically harmed. Just after the first day, a riot broke out. Since this event happened without supervision from the research staff, this was the first time that brute strength was used to subdue a conflict, and the prisoners were beaten up to control the riot. During the course of the experiment, guards forced prisoners to physical punishment, such as removing their mattresses, leaving them to sleep on the concrete. Sometimes the guards would refuse to let the prisoners empty their sanitation bucket, causing sanitary conditions to worsen. Another experiment concerning ethical issues is the Milgram's experiment in 1963. This experiment, led by Stanley Milgram, measures about people's obedience on orders, even those orders are against their will. Through newspaper ads and flyers, he received 40 participants with a variety of age and occupation. Each volunteer was given a role to teach a learner. The volunteers were told to teach the learner some words. The teacher was given an electric shock generator, and if the learner gave an incorrect answer, the teacher would administer a shock to the learner. For each time the learner was shocked, the voltage of the shock would increase. However, the participants did not know that the shocks were fakes, and the learners were professionals who faked their painful reactions. One glaring ethical issue with the experiment is the deception to the participants. The participants were lied to about the aim of the study. They were told that this study had something to do with memory, but actually the experiment was about their obedience. Although this was used to prevent any changes in behavior such as the Hawthorne or the screw-you effect, the participants were in a great deal of stress when they found out that the memory experiment turned into an electric one. One could say that lying to them in the first place caused stress. In a researcher's point of view, Milgram should have designed his experiment so that the participants knew what the study was about, but at the same time will not change behaviorally by knowing the intentions of the study. Another issue is the fake sense of safety and security of the experiment. When the participants knew that dangers such as shocking people was involved, they should know that their well-beings are in danger. If the experiment had gone bad, this can cause a lot of trouble for both the experimenter and the participants themselves. However, the experiment was done in Yale University campus, which creates a sense of safety that the experiment is a legitimate one. If the experiment was done in a random place, chances are that many people would have decided to leave because there is no backup plan if things go wrong. Additionally, Yale flyers were used to get the participants. However, Yale was not part of the experiment, which again will not be responsible if anything had gone wrong, but the participants believed otherwise. The Stanford prison experiment was in interest by the US Navy and the Marine Corps about the conflict between military guards and prisoners. The Milgram experiment was to solve the mystery about the sense of morality during the Holocaust. But no matter how important the cause of an experiment is, if the experiment involves hurting people directly or indirectly, then the experiment should not be allowed. In my opinion, I think that although all ethical requirements are needed, the most important ethical standard is the people's consent. If the people choose not to enter, he may do so, and nothing can be used to change their mind.